What is up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel and to a Let's Chat video that is not a video request. It's been a while since I've done a Let's Chat video that's like not a request or a requested topic, but to those of you that have requested videos, I promise you they are coming, okay? They just, like I said before, they take me some time to do because I have to research and, gather pictures and videos and this and that. So they do take some time, but they are coming. Also, y'all see this dramatic ass look I'm wearing. It is look number 2 of my Winter Wonders series, and I will be uploading the tutorial for this, so stay tuned for that. Now, the topic of today's video, I had no intention of really doing, but I was inspired to make this video after an incident. I mean, it wasn't really even an incident, it was just a stupid little thing, but a few nights ago, I had commented on another YouTuber's channel, okay? She is another Latina, a whiter Latina, okay? Some of y'all probably know who I'm talking about. I had commented on her channel like I usually do. And I gave her a compliment because I felt that she looked pretty in that video. And somebody, commented under my comment saying to basically like stop kissing her ass and like wanting to be white or some shit. So, I was like, the fuck? Like, excuse my language. So I can't give somebody a compliment that's lighter than me because that means that I envy them or that I want to be white. Like, how did you make that connection? So a darker skinned person can't compliment a lighter skinned person without it being because inwardly they feel a sense of self-loathing and wishing that they were whiter and lighter and all that bullshit. Like, one, you're a dumbass. And two, if I feel a woman looks beautiful, if I feel she looks pretty and I want to compliment her, I'm going to compliment her regardless of how much lighter or darker she is than me. Like, what the hell? Like, I can't compliment another woman, another human being, Anyway, it was stupid. But that little stupid incident inspired me basically to want to talk about this. And it is something that, I've thought about anyway. And so I figured, why not make a video about it? So I've said this before, but I feel like in a way I'm kind of an idealist, like I like to see the best in people, or I like to try and see the good in people, but I also a lot of times I like to think of how things would be in an ideal world, right? In an ideal society where people are not so consumed and obsessed with race and color and class, in a world where people could look at each other's differences but not feel either intimidated by those differences or where people could celebrate each other's differences and be able to see beauty and value in your own features and your own assets, but also be able to see the beauty and, the qualities that somebody different from you has, But of course, that is not the society we live in. And while there are people that possess those qualities, the society at large or the world at large does not always think that way. So that brings me to the topic of whether, white and black Latinos can get along and just kind of the racial dynamic between both, right? And again, going back to my ideal way of thinking, in my mind, I see no reason why a white and black Latino could not get along. And I think when it comes to the topic of, race relations or just racism within Latin America, there are many varying opinions, which, makes sense considering that geographically Latin America is huge. And there are many different, cultures within Latin America. There's many different races of people. So people's experiences and people's opinions are going to vary greatly. depending on, what you're used to, how the society in your particular country is, how race relations in that particular country is. It's going to vary based on, how homogenous or how, mixed the populations in that country are. So again, the opinions vary. There are some that feel that Latin America is pretty much void of racism, and that our mixedness basically alludes to that. While there are others that feel like, no, Latin America is extremely racist. It's just not as obvious because the Spanish, for the most part, with the exception of like a few places, they didn't enact strict segregation laws. Most countries didn't experience things like Jim Crow. If anything, the Spanish promoted race mixing, even though there were their own low-key racist reasons behind it, but nonetheless, they promoted race mixing. So people think because of that there is no racism, when in reality there is. That the Spanish were actually obsessed with race and all that just as much as the British were. They just went about it in different ways. Or people will say, well, since Spain is so close to Africa, that the Spanish were already used to seeing, darker skinned people. And, there was that proximity there. Which is, different from the other Europeans. So again, that proves that they weren't as racist. So, whatever. There's a whole lot of different opinions. And, I am of the belief that multiple things can be true at once. So I kind of feel like there's a little bit of truth in all of that. And again, it just varies. It varies depending on where you are. It depends on the time period. It depends on a lot of things. So a couple months ago, I came across this idea, or this term, this concept called Latin American exceptionalism. And I found it to be quite interesting. And so just to give you guys the definition, so this idea basically states that a social history of intermarriage and mixing of the races is unique to Latin America. The large mestizo populations, or you could just say mixed, that result from high levels of interracial union common to the region are linked to racial democracy or racial harmony. So I was like, wow, that's very interesting, because I feel that a lot of Latinos think that. And to be completely honest, I've felt that way to a certain extent. I think because so many of our societies are so mixed, and you go to certain countries and you see people just with so many different of so many different shades, so many different features, that it kind of creates this illusion, I guess you could say, that racism does not exist, because there is no clear racial divide between people. But the reality is that while genetically or phenotypically there might not be that clear distinction, the idea of racism still persists. And that is, I feel like, part of the problem, because there are people, regardless of how they look, that still hold on to these idea of racial hierarchy, or, believing that one race is superior to another. But at the same time, I feel like there are people that hold on to this concept, and they really feel this, and they project that, and they show this in their actions, because they themselves have been exposed to so many different people that are just so mixed, and they're used to seeing people that either look like them or different than them. They don't feel so much of that racism, I guess. And I feel like that was more so my experience. I grew up in a family that is quite mixed. A lot of us are, different skin tones. There's some that are quite light, and there's some that are very dark. I know a lot of us that are in this middle range of light and dark. So for me, I never experienced this whole racism thing, or having a white Dominican be racist towards me. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that racism doesn't exist, or that, you know, there aren't racist Dominicans. Of course they are. But, you know, it varies, I guess, a lot on your personal experiences. Oh my God, I keep having to pause recording because I keep coughing. I've had this dry cough for like a week and won't go away. Anyway, so that's just within Latin America. Now, for those of us that are here in the US, I feel like our experiences are a little different because it's not like, you know, our relatives that are back home that are surrounded mainly just by their group of people. But here we're exposed to all different groups of people and all different types of Latinos. So I feel like our experiences, they kind of vary more about where you are geographically in the US and what are the dominant Latino groups in that area. So with that being said, I feel like that makes a lot of us a little less racist, but at the same time, there are still some Latinos here that are still racist as fuck. And truth be told, there are certain Latinos that are very much about this, how can I say? They're very much about keeping their circles, you know, very tight-knit just among them, their own kind or their own race, and maintaining their own racial purity and things like that. I mean, that whole concept is definitely not, it's not like exclusive to just like white Americans. I mean, there are some white Latinos that feel this way as well. And they're not too keen on the intermixing and stuff between races. So, you know, it is what it is. I mean, if that's how you feel, cool. As long as you don't say nothing disrespectful to me, you know, do you know what I mean? But again, going back to those of us here, I feel like it's a little easier, I think, for us to be a little more open-minded or to be a little more accepting of other groups of people. And I think our opinions are also very much influenced or shaped by the experiences we have with these other groups of people or groups of Latinos. Now, for those of you that watched my video I recently did on my experiences with Black women and Black people, y'all remember me saying that I have like no white friends. Well, no white American friends. But I will say though that so apart from my main crew of Black girls, I do have like other good friends outside of them. And I will say that in my personal experience, at least, I do find it easier to make friends with white Latinos than with white Americans, obviously. I do think that despite our racial differences, there is still a type of like, what's the word? Glue there that ties us together based on our like kind of shared or similar cultures. For example, I have a really good friend who is a white Puerto Rican. I've known her since I was like 7. I met her through my church. She doesn't go to the church anymore, but you know, we're still cool. I saw her just a few months ago, actually. And, you know, me and her used to always joke because even though, you know, she's like white and I'm like Black, we had similar experiences in that people never assumed that we were Latina. Like, people obviously thought that I was Black, but people would always think that she was white, like white American, because, you know, she's quite white. You know, she's very light skinned. She has blue eyes. Like, she looks, I mean, to me, honestly, she looks Puerto Rican to me. I think like you can look at her and tell, but of course, most people can't. So people won't know that she's Puerto Rican until they either see her name or she starts talking to them in Spanish or something. And, you know, she has like that very heavy Puerto Rican accent. She was born here, but she still adopted the Puerto Rican accent. So, you know, when you hear her speak Spanish, it's like, oh, okay, you're Boricua. But yeah, you know, even despite that, like, there was always like that shared, I guess you could say like that Caribbean connection to an extent. And I also feel like, I mean, between Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, there's always been like that I don't know, I guess you could say a love-hate relationship. But I think out of all the Latin groups, Puerto Ricans are the one that we're kind of like closest to. I mean, geographically as well. But so I don't know, I always kind of looked at that friendship with her like it was just so like simple to connect with her and to be friends with her because we had that shared like, you know, Latin thing, that Hispanic thing, whatever you want to call it. Like I don't even know how to describe it. But yeah, I mean our race was never an issue. And I think for a lot of white and black Latinos, that sometimes ends up being the case. Now, something else that I think makes the race relations or the racial dynamics among Latinos very interesting is because in a lot of our countries, particularly the countries that have, you know, high amounts of like mixed race, you know, populations, I find that, and I kind of touched on this in my last video on reggaeton, which the person ended up having to delete their comment because it was just a mess under that comment. But I mentioned how, you know, in a lot of these countries, like for example in DR, most of the culture is shared by everyone. And again, I've kind of mentioned this before, using the US as an example. Here in the US, like there's a very distinct white culture and there's a very distinct black culture. But in a lot of Latin American countries, that's not necessarily the case. Like there might be like smaller subcultures or like, you know, subgenres of music that are more specific to one particular group. For example, in DR, balo music, that's more like specific to our African ancestry. But for the most part, like the main aspects of our culture, they're shared by everyone. You know, merengue, bachata, all that, like that's shared by everyone regardless of race. So it's not uncommon to see a white bachatero or a black bachatero or a white merenguero or a black merenguero. Even within dembow, like it's not uncommon to see a light-skinned, you know, person doing dembow or a dark-skinned person doing dembow. So I think even looking at that and seeing those images, that'll make you think, well, we don't really experience racism. The white people and the black people, they get along just fine. We all we share everything. We're not segregated, you know. Yeah, racism isn't that bad. And you know, again, that is kind of my thought process a lot of times. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that racism isn't there, or that there aren't, you know, whiter Dominicans that are racist towards black Dominicans, because I mean that certainly happens, and not just in DR, but in any of these Latin American countries. So I don't know if people within Latin America or even like Latinos here in the US, if despite our mixedness, if we will ever truly reach a place where there isn't this racial divide between, you know, white and black Latinos, or where there won't be this racial hierarchy where, you know, black people in certain Latin American populations won't be marginalized. You know, I don't know if we will ever fully get there, because again, a lot of it goes back to an idea. You know, racism, it's not just an act, but it's an idea. And to get rid of that idea, I feel like many times is very hard. And in this day and age, I feel like right now in society, there are two very like polarizing type of movements going on. There are those that are pushing a lot more for acceptance among all Latinos and trying to promote this unity among everyone. And yeah, we're all Latinos. Doesn't matter your race, you know, and you know, trying to portray this happy union between all of us. But at the same time, there are groups that don't want that, and they're not for the race mixing, and you know, like I said earlier. So I don't know. I feel like this video was kind of all over the place because honestly, my thoughts are kind of scattered when it comes to this idea, because I feel like on the one hand, it's entirely possible for us to get along and to not have issues with each other. But at the same time, I know that there's still real issues that exist, even more so within Latin America when it comes to these racial things. So I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever fully get to a place where that whole idea of Latin American exceptionalism will be the truth and not just a theory, if that makes sense. So that was it for this video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Whether you're white, black, or if you just consider yourself mixed, what is your thoughts on this? Do you feel that Latinos, regardless of race, that we can all get along? Or do you feel that we should just kind of stick more to our own kind, or whatever the heck is that you think? All ideas are welcome, okay, as long as we keep it respectful. So yeah, that was it, and I'll see you all next video. Bye.